Alright, class, Mrs. Sorrells here, back for another MTV show. We're going to start Unit 5 today. We're going to be looking at what's called ratios. We've got some keywords here for you. We'd like you to define after the video in your own words to show your own understanding. So here are the 5 words you should be listening for today. Not the only 5 words, but these are important. So ratio, comparison, part to whole, and scaling. Alright, so let's look at what a ratio is. A ratio is a comparison, and the pen doesn't like it's writing funny, so just bear with me. It's a comparison between two items. Okay? And it can be a comparison of things that are like the same, or it can be two random things that are compared. It's just a comparison. Alright, let's look. There are 2 different types of ratios. There's part to part and there's part to whole. Okay? This will make more sense in a minute, but for now, part to part is when you compare a part of something to another part. Can I put the Skittles bag up there? Because look at the example. It says comparing red Skittles to purple Skittles. Now these are both Skittles and they're both the same thing, but we've got red and we've got purple, and both of those are part of the Skittles bag. It's not the whole bag, okay? So let's go down and look at what part to whole is. Part to whole is comparing one part to the whole, or everything. And in this case, it'd be the entire Skittles bag. How many Skittles are in the bag? So here is comparing how many yellow Skittles out of the whole Skittle bag. I picked yellow because yellow's yucky. You want to count and see how many you got you don't like and you're going to give away. Red and purple are my favorites. That's why we put them up here. Alright. Now a ratio can be expressed in 3 different forms. So we're just going to pick a random ratio. Let's say our ratio is 2 to 3. Okay? You can write it like this, 2 with the colon and then the 3. So the colon goes in between the numbers. You can actually write it with the word 2. Or you can write it as a fraction, 2 to 3. Now this is not 2/3 because it's 2 to 3. It looks like a fraction, but it's really a ratio. And the way you find out it's a ratio is from reading the problem and looking at the situation. Okay? When you write a ratio, you must write it in the order that it is stated or asked in the question. Okay? So you must write it in the order stated. Where'd the pen go? Order stated or the order asked. Promise it's the pen, not my handwriting. If they want to write the ratio of red to blue, you must write the amount of red first and then blue, because they stated it red and blue, so you need to keep it in that order. So down here I wrote real big, order matters. You can't switch it up. You got to keep it how they've asked. Alright? Okay, so now you're going to really get to see what a ratio is. So we've got this picture over here, and we're going to use this picture to write our ratios. So we're going to write a ratio of how many squares to how many triangles. And what that means is for every square, how many triangles are there? In the picture, there are 3 squares and 4 triangles. So I can write it 3 ways. I can write it 3 to 4. I can write it 3 to 4 with the colon in between. Or I can write it 3 to 4 as a fraction. Now this isn't 3/4, it means 3 squares to 4 triangles, comparing 2 different things. Now let's think, is this part to part or is this part to whole? This one is part to part because it's 2 different items. We didn't count all of the shapes. Okay? Let's look at three-sided to four-sided. So it's just really asked differently, but it's the same question. Well, the three-sided is the triangles. The four-sided is the squares. Keeping in mind that order matters. So I need to list the three-sided shape first. There are 4 triangles. So I'm going to write 4. And then I'm going to write 2. And there are 3 four-sided shapes. I can also write it 4 with the colon and then the 3, and also I can write it as a fraction. The 4 is representing the three-sided shapes. Whoops. Yeah, three-sided shapes, and then four-sided shapes. Okay? This again is part to part, because it is 2 different items. Alright, let's do triangles to squares. So, how many triangles? 4 triangles. How many squares? 3 squares. I chose to use the colon first, and then let's use the word 2, and then let's write it as a fraction. So they start to look the same, they're just asking in different ways. Now this last one's a little bit different. It's how many squares to all of them. So we said that there are 3 squares, but then we have to figure out how many is all of them. 4 is not how many all of them is. What you have to do is you have to take the squares and add them to the triangles and find out what your denominator is. 3 plus 4 is 7. Okay, so your total is 7. So this is 3 to 7, 3 to 7 using the word 2, or 3 sevens. And you can say this one as a fraction because it's out of how many altogether. This is actually a part to whole. And it's part to whole because we're looking at how many in all we have. Okay? Let's look at another example. 16 boys and 13 girls in the class. So we've got to list boys, then girls, because that's how they're asking. So how many boys? 16. How many girls? 13. 16 to 13. 16 with a colon to 13. And this is part to part because you are comparing 2 different items, boys and girls. Alright, what about girls to all? So I've got to list the girls first. We've said 13 girls. And how many in all? Well, there's 16 boys and 13 girls. So what you have to do is come over to the side and add up how many students there are in all, and that makes it 29. So there's 13 girls out of 29 students. And then I can write it like this. And also with the word 2. Okay? And then now we're just switching the order of the first one. Now it's girls to boys. So instead of 16 to 13, it'll be 13 to 16, 13 to 16, and 13 with the word 2 to 16. And you can see either one of these 3 ways. Don't get used to the one way that you like the best because they can ask it in any way and you need to be able to recognize it. Lastly, because we can express the ratio as a fraction, we can also simplify or scale up or down the ratios. Just like a fraction, we can create equivalent fractions. Now we're going to create equivalent ratios. So here's the situation. You're making pancakes and the recipe calls for 3 cups of flour and 2 cups of milk. Now you're not really calling somebody. This is a word that's used when you are making something. When it says calls, it's telling you how much you need. So we need 3 cups of flour and 2 cups of milk. What happens if you need to make a lot more and you're going to prepare for a huge pancake party you're having? Well, let's just say you need 4 times the amount. Okay? What you're going to do is you're going to create an equivalent, not fraction, but a ratio, because this is a comparison here. Here's your comparison. You've got 3 cups, this is flour, and you've got 2 cups of milk. Notice I am labeling what the number goes with. We're going to use this later. We're going to take baby steps, but remember that you want to label what each number represents. So 3 cups of flour, 2 cups of milk. Now if I need 4 times that amount, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to multiply each one by 4, numerator and denominator, both parts of the ratio, and you're going to come up with Well, I need 12 cups of flour, and then I'll need 8 cups of milk. This is something that is definitely real world example, because if you're cooking or making something, they give you a suggested amount, but sometimes the family might be large, or maybe someone's not there that night, and so you need to scale up or scale down according to your needs. Okay, so this is an example of scaling it up to create an equivalent ratio to adjust to the needs that we needed. Okay, this is all I have for you today. Please go back and define those words in your own words. Ms. Sorrell's class, I'll be looking. Mr. Nelson's, he'll be looking too. Okay, you got to know what these words mean, and Miss Mitchell's. Okay, so thank you for the time again. We appreciate your hard work. Keep it up, and we will see you in class tomorrow with this and the Google Doc complete. Don't come unprepared.